Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Journey Back to You podcast tonight. We are tonight or tomorrow morning, whichever time that you hear this. This is the book chat where I am talking about different books that I have gleaned information from, gleaned insights, all of the things of that nature along my journey back to you. So if you are listening to the Journey Back to You podcast. And this is where you are hearing this, or you are watching me over on YouTube, where the Journey Back to You podcast is featuring the book chat. Okay. And so I promised that for the next 90 days, I would do the first and fourth weekends, and I will be sharing my books that I have listened and watched. And I would say listened to and read them. This book is a book that I was reading. I was pregnant with my son. And so it probably was, he is 2. So I've read this book over 2 years ago. And I absolutely recommend it for anybody who is religious. For anybody who is religious. That's just off the top that I want to say. And the reason I say this is because I was at a very religious place in my life when I was reading this book. And what I found is that it really shook up my world because of the title of this book. So the title of this book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And that's supposed to be the F word. So it's supposed to be the F bomb, Fuck. Okay. Just so we are playing here. We are grown, we're adults. I'm assuming that everyone who listens to, no, I'm not going to assume. I know that everyone who listens to my podcast is over the age of 20. And so I'm sure you've used that word a couple of times. A counterintuitive approach to living a good life by Mark Manson. I highly recommend to read this book. And the reasons I would say this, I'm going to share with you the 4 things that I took from the book. So if you're listening and you're interested in hearing more, you want to keep listening to this. So reason number 1 is pain is a catalyst for change. And he talks about this in his book. He doesn't say it that way. Those are my words, but he says it very eloquently in this book. The second reason you should read this book is changing what you value. If you are changing things that you value in the sense of what your values are, that is number 2 reason why you should read this book. The third reason that you should read this book is if you have problems with conflict, or you don't understand what conflict is, if you don't have a healthy view of what conflict can bring about, that is the third reason you should read this book. And the fourth reason that you should read this book is if you are looking to have healthier relationships. Those are 4 reasons that I came up with myself based off of what I was reading in this book. My overall theme that I gathered from this book is to be comfortable with being different. There's some places in my life, like even now, for me to still embrace, like I have hair under my arms, and that is not something that most people are okay with as a female. As in the society today, most women shave their armpits, and I'll be quite honest with y'all, it was something that took years and years. And I'm sharing this at the top. This is not going to be about me, it is going to be about the book. However, I want to share this. Like, for me, this book helped me to become comfortable with being different. And then not giving an F about what people will say, what people will think. So a couple of times I may reach and stuff like that. So I don't want to catch you off guard if you see that, hey, she has armpit hair that bothers me. Guess what? I don't give an F about what you think. I just want to say that off the top. And for the sake of this book time, I want to just jump into it and talk about it. I'm going to try to keep this under an hour because I usually go a whole hour. I got to sneeze. Bless me. Ooh, might as well take a sip of water. By the way, for those of you who are not watching, you will want to go on YouTube and see this. This is my favorite water in the whole wide world. It is called Topo Chico. And I talk about this on my podcast as well, but now you can see it. If you ever want to try one, it's Topo Chico. This one is a twist of lime. They come in 3 different flavors. This is not an ad, but this is one of my favorite drinks. And this is another part of me being okay with being different, because I know my husband does not like them. I tried to get my family to drink them before when we were staying in Texas and they weren't into them. That's actually where I found that water. It was in Texas. It's a mineral water. It actually, most people tell me it tastes like carbonated water, but I absolutely love how it tastes. Especially when it's super, super cold. It is amazing. So yeah, that is that. Let's get into that. Was just something I want to add it as a tidbit for those of you who are watching on YouTube. So let me show you the book. This is the book that we're reading from because I'm gonna take the sleeve off as I go through it, just for the sake of wanting to not fumble through the. It's the book. So let's jump into it. The reasons that I told you that you should read this book, number one was that pain is a catalyst for change. So let's jump into that. All right, here we are. So let's just jump into the $1 million question that was in this book. I literally wrote this. Don't talk about my tabs because I got to stay on focus. But this is what I wrote. Wow, $1 million question, y'all. $1 million question, I believe. So here we are. This subtitle to this chapter is Choose Your Struggle. And I wrote that this was $1 million question in this book because for me, I was like, wow, like here we are. So this is what it says. So I'm going to read you what it says at the top, and I'm going to get to the $1 million question because I was going to just give you the question, but what I just thought about is like, why give these people the question? Anyways, let's do it. So the subtitle of this chapter is Choose Your Struggle. If I ask you, what do you want out of your life? And you say something like, I want to be happy and have a great family and a job I like. Your response is so common and expected that it doesn't really mean anything. Everybody enjoys what feels good. Everyone wants a life. Everyone wants to live a life. Excuse me tonight. I'm going to start that again. Everyone enjoys what feels good. Everyone wants to live a carefree, happy, and easy life, to fall in love and have amazing sex and relationships, to look perfect and make money and be popular and well respected and admired and a total baller to the point that people part like the Red Sea when they walk into the room. Everybody wants that. It's easy to want that. A more interesting question, a question that most people never consider is, what pain do you want in your life? What are you willing to struggle for? Because that seems to be a greater detriment of how our lives, because that seems to be a greater determinant of how our lives turn out. And I said, wow, $1 million questions. So I'm going to read you the $2 million questions. What pain do you want your life? What pain do you want in your life? And two, what are you willing to struggle for? Because that seems to be a greater determinant of how our lives turn out. Listen. So the reason I said that these are $1 million questions is because, first of all, so let me give y'all some story about where I was, well, where I am, I should say. I'm at a place where I've realized over, I want to say 2020 was when I came to this phrase that pain is a catalyst for change. And the next thing I'm going to go over is going to kind of give y'all more insight to what I mean. Pain being the catalyst for change was something that in 2020 I had came to revelation of, and reading this now helps me to see that I wasn't just coming up with these phrases. It wasn't just something just cliche. It wasn't just a phrase that I came up with, but that this is a real life like principle, real life like fundamental, like this is universal. Like he gives an example in here about how when people stub their toe on a dresser drawer or something like that. Like we all probably have said words like, oh my God, I hit my toe. Or you probably said the F word, or you probably said the S word, or whatever curse word you want to say there. But the thing about it that I realized that he's really getting to the meat of is not about the curse words, not about us like, man, I hurt my toe, but that pain was a catalyst for you to say that word, or that pain was a catalyst for you to move that dresser, or that pain was a catalyst for you to talk to the dresser, something that is not a person, and be like, Get out of the way. Where'd you come from? Even if that dresser has been in your house, however long you've been staying there, and that dresser has been in the same place, but that pain was a catalyst for change. Like you either, move the dresser, you said these words, blah, 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 blah. So my point here is that those are $1 million questions, because what pain do you want in, like, what pain do, like, we're all going to experience pain in our lives. But his whole thing with saying about pain here, it's like everybody can enjoy what feels good. Everybody wants to live this carefree, happy life. However, pain is going to meet you at some place in this journey. And so I'm going to go over to kind of give you more of what he's saying here. He says, in fact, so I'm going to go to, he says, oh, here it is. Pain in all of its forms and is our body's most effective means of spurring action. So here's the example I was just telling y'all about. Take something as simple as stubbing your toe. If you're like me, when you stub your toe, you scream enough four-letter words to make Pope Francis cry. You also probably blame some poor inanimate object for your suffering. Stupid table, you say, or maybe you go as far as to question your entire interior design philosophy based on your throbbing foot. What kind of idiot puts a table there anyways? Seriously. Physical pain is a product of our nervous system, a feedback mechanism to give us a sense of our own physical proportions, where we can and cannot move, and what we can and cannot touch. When we exceed those limitations, our nervous system dully punishes us to make sure we pay attention and never do that again. And this pain, as much as we hate it, is useful. Pain is what teaches us what to pay attention to when we're young or careless. It helps show us what's good for us versus what's bad for us. It helps us to understand and adhere to our limitations. It teaches us. So I'm going to stop there. You'll have to get the book to finish out all of this. But there's a part in here where he also talks about psychological pain, and that it's also basically like our brains don't separate the types of like physical pain from like psychological, like things that are happening in your mind. So like when somebody breaks up with you is the example that he gives. Somebody breaks up with you, you may not be able to say that you're physically hurting, like your finger hurts, or you cut your finger, or you cut your arm, or you hurt your toe, but you are psychologically experiencing pain. And he's saying in here, like, our brain doesn't know the difference between those pain. So, um, it's not necessary, like, and that pain is not necessarily bad or even undesirable. In some cases, why is my elbow itching? In some cases, experiencing emotional or psychological pain can be healthy or necessary. Just like stubbing your toe, it teaches us to walk into fewer tables. The emotional pain of rejection or failure teaches us how to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. That like he says some very like some of the things that he says are simplistic. Some of the things that he says in here are like common, what we would consider common knowledge or common phrases or whatever you want to say there. But what I think is the way that he wrote these words and put them together to get us to see a very common concept of us choosing our pain was very profound to me, because I've lived a lot of life, let's just say it that way. And I'm currently working on my own book, and for real this time, y'all. So those of you who've been following my channel and you're like, hey, she talked about this 3 years ago, it's for real, for real now. I got accountability and all the things. So that, but I want to say that this phrase of pain is catalyst for change is very profound in what he's saying, right? Because he's saying like, man, no matter what type of pain you've experienced, that is a catalyst for something different. And I would like to say a positive change, because oftentimes, like, if you think about when you burn your finger, let's say you burned your finger on the stove or something, you may have burned your finger on the stove, but it's when I say it's a positive change, it means you can now care for that wound because you burned it. If that's resonating, I hope that went over well. So basically what I'm saying is not saying it's okay to burn your finger, but I'm saying that, okay, you burnt your finger, and now because you know the stove is hot, you will not go and do that thing again. And you can now care for that wound in a great way because you know I burned it on the stove. How do I care for a burn? Basically diagnosing the pain and then being able to do what you need to do to get that pain like to that pain to subside, or to just heal that pain. And I think in here he does a really, really great job of saying the way to heal our pain. He goes on, so I'm going to go to my next one, is to basically choose what you value and what you give an F about. And what I'll say is what you care about, what you choose to give your time to, who you choose to give your time to, the things you choose to give your time to, the things that you care about in your everyday life. Like right now, I'm choosing not to give an F about social media. Like I am not on it. I'm not like, oh, let me see what they're doing. I do not care right now because I have some things that I'm working towards that social media is not included in. Right. And so I'm choosing not to care about that right now. But there are some people who value social media so much that they build their whole platform. I would say their whole, most of their platform, or their platform is actually social media. So they can value that. And that's something else that he talks about in here that I don't have written down, but I want to say that there's something else you can grab from the book. It's like what you value is not bad. What you value is not good. It is good for you. You see what I'm saying? But like for right now, the things that I have set before me that I want to do and accomplish do not social media is not in the picture for that. Like that is a waste of time for me right now of the things that I am working towards. And so, but for someone else, if they've built their platform on that, to say that we both, like I value it and they don't value it, that's okay because they're making money using social media. You see what I'm saying? So what I want to say is like if you something around your values as well, this is something that I did not have, but I feel like it's very, very great to say, is that when it comes to this, you want to also read this book if values are something like you don't know what you value and what you care about in this world, because he talks about that a lot. But I feel like there's several reviewers that you can look up on YouTube about this book, and they're going to talk about that because that is like the meaty part of the book. But I wanted to give my perspective as to, for those of you who are like, hey, I haven't heard someone say this before. So these are where we're going. So let's go to number 2. If you are changing what you're valuing, this is the part for you. So I'll share a little bit of my story. I exchanged the value of resiliency. 20, we're in 2022. So 2020, 2021, I decided that resiliency, meaning like your ability to adapt to change, your ability to be able to adapt to change in the sense of like adversity is in front of you and you're able to like, and I think of it like a rubber band. Rubber band stretches out, but it also can retract back. But it will not be the same. It's like if you stretch it so far, it won't retract back to be the same size that it was when you first started. And so that's what I think of when I think of resiliency. If I have to give you like some type of like physical thing that you can think of, that's what I would say. And so I exchanged that value last year, resiliency, and it was hard. It was hard because resiliency has been something that's interwoven into. I exchanged it for connection, and connection and some other things I should say, but connection was one of them. And what I really was gathering from wanting to exchange resiliency as one of the things of my top values, I realized that it was hard because a lot of my story was around being resilient. Excuse me. A lot of my story was around being resilient, and a lot of my story is still around, like when I talk about I've been through sexual abuse as a child. And I won't go into all of the things, but that's just one of the ones that I talk about a lot, and it'll make sense as um I continue to do this channel and stuff like that. But that was one of the things that was really high of the things that I was navigating, and continue to navigate, I would say, and heal from. And so that is something that I'm like, and I'm able to now speak about this without crying. I'm able to speak about this without having a very, very traumatic experience like later today or later tonight, I should say. And so when I think of sharing those stories back then and tearing up and getting frustrated or being angry all over again, I was I was using I had that story on a pedestal, and resiliency was the thing that I was looking forward to, or like had above it, if you will. So I was trying to get them to be here, like I am resilient because this situation, and I'm here now. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna sever this, and resiliency can be its own thing, and this story of my childhood could be this other thing. Well, part of my childhood could be this own thing. And so in doing that, it was hard because I had to not identify with the story, my childhood story. But I did not no longer want to identify as this resilient person because I wanted to be soft, more softer. I wanted to be more like more feminine, I would say. I wanted to be more of myself and not identify as this resilient person who can take anything and be able to bounce back like a rubber band, right? So I share that to say that changing values is not an easy thing, and he also emphasizes this thing in this book. And not it is, and this is not to validate what I'm saying. This is just to share with you that I was able to relate to this story when I first relate to this story, this book when I first read it. But then I also was able to pick it up a couple of times and be like, oh my goodness, remember you read this in this book, Sierra. Remember that not only that you read this in this book, but it was helpful and it was confirming to what you were experiencing, and it's also confirming to where you're going and the things that you are striving to do. And so I want to say to you, if you are changing your values, this is going to be very helpful to you because of what he says here. And he says, here we are. There is, let's see where I want to start with this. Okay, here we are. You are already choosing in every moment of every day what to give an F about. So change is as simple as choosing to give an F about something else. And I'll just say to care from now on. Instead of saying an F, I'll say to care about something else. Okay. It really is that simple. It's just not easy. It's not, it really is that simple. It's just not easy. It's not easy because you're going to feel like a loser, a fraud. At first, you're going to be nervous. You're going to freak out. You may get pissed off at your wife or your friends or your father in the process. These are all side effects of changing your values, of changing the care that you're giving, but they are inevitable. It's simple, but really, really hard. Let's look at some of the side effects. You're going to feel uncertain when you're changing your values. I guarantee it. Should I really give this up? Is this the right thing to do? Giving up a value you've depended on for years is going to feel disorienting, as if you don't really know right from wrong anymore. This is hard, but it's normal. Next, you'll feel like a failure. You spent half of your life measuring yourself. Think about the story I just shared with you. You spent half of your life measuring yourself by that old value. So when you change your priorities, you change your metrics, and you stop behaving in the same way, you'll fail to meet the old trusted metric and thus immediately feel like some sort of fraud or nobody. This is also normal and also uncomfortable. And certainly you will weather rejections. Many of the relationships in your life were built around the values you've been keeping. So the moment you change those values, the moment you decide that studying is more important than partying, that getting married and having a family is more important than rampant sex, that working a job you believe in is more important than money, your turnaround will reverberate Your turnaround will reverberate out through your relationships, and many of them will blow up in your face. This too is normal, and this too will be uncomfortable. These are necessary, though painful side effects of choosing your cares place your cares elsewhere in a place far more important and more worthy of your energies. As you reassess your values, you will be met with internal and external resistance along the way. More than anything, you will feel uncertain. You will wonder if what you're doing is wrong. But as we'll see, this is a good thing. That's all I'm going to say on that. And I'm not going to add to what he said. I'm just going to say, I shared my little story. I shared my little tidbit, but that's what he has to say. Mark Manson has to say about changing your values. It is a process. It is a process. And it's not one, it's easy, but it's very, I want to say it how he said it. He said that it's simple, but it's really, really, really hard. Okay. So that is about changing your values. So that is number two. Number three thing that I said, that if you that you should read this book if conflict was something that you didn't have a great relationship with. So we're going to move into conflict. Let's see what the subtle art of not giving an F has to say about this. All right. So let's see where I want to start. Conflict exists to show us who is there for us unconditionally and who is just there for the benefits. No one trusts a yes man. If disappointment bear panda, you have to get the book so you can understand what he's saying when he say this. If disappointment panda were here, he'd tell you that the pain in our relationship is necessary to cement our trust in each other and produce greater intimacy. So what I took from that was that conflict can produce intimacy, right? So let's keep reading. For a relationship to be healthy, both must be willing and able to both say no and hear no without negation, without the occasional rejection, boundaries, breakdown, and one person's problems and values come to dominate the others. Conflict, let's read it again. Without that negation, without that occasional rejection, boundaries break down, and one person's problem and values come to dominate the others. Conflict is not only normal, conflict is not only normal, then it's absolutely necessary for the maintenance of a healthy relationship. If two people who are close are not able to hash out their differences openly and vocally, then the relationship is based on manipulation and misrepresentation, and it will slowly become toxic. Where was this book in 2010, 11, 12? Where was it for me? I needed to read that. I probably would not have been able to digest it then, but I totally was going through a whole bunch of guy problems and friendship stuff then. But and I still can read this to this day at the age of 32 and still take something from that. And what I'm saying here is that, man, like, not what I am saying. What he is saying here is that conflict is normal. And if your relationship, in layman's term, does not have any conflict in it, then it's probably not sustainable. And you probably are friends, or you're probably married to, or you're probably in relationship, or your boss is probably, or your pastor is probably a yes man. And no one loves a yes man, because if your relationship cannot sustain conflict, then what do you really have? You are on, is misrepresentation there, and it's manipulation that's being done there. So that is just plainly said. I thought it was an amazing way that he said this, and like I said, don't have any words to add there. That's, I'm gonna just let that sit there. So here we are to the last thing. I said that health, like if you're seeking health in relationships, then this would be this topic. This would be the last one. So here we are. I'm having fun, y'all. I'm having fun. I said I was gonna keep it under an hour, so I'm gonna take another sip of my water. But this book is not, it's about, let me tell you how many pages it is. Um, like 200 and something pages. So it's a fairly easy read. If you can like, it can be a fairly easy read if you're at a space where you can digest it, because he does say the F-bomb several times throughout the book. But I personally felt that it was necessary to break up the thoughts that you potentially could be having in your mind about change and about health in relationships and about values, because yes, it is good, y'all. Oh my goodness. Okay. So this last part, once again, is about health in relationships. So I just talked about conflict. But this other part, I was like, I gotta absolutely, I gotta absolutely share this. And if you did not listen to last week's episode, then you may want to go and listen to, not last week's, last month's, the first one that I did, the book chat series, is about a book called letting go of good. And this concept that I'm about to share came up in this book as well. I read these books in total different places in my life, but clearly there was like a theme that me letting go of good is still a thread that has been um following me. And I wouldn't say following me, but been finding me. And I find myself like digging through this stuff and being like, okay, girl, it's time for you to dig through this stuff and get to it. And I still been getting to it. So this is, if you haven't listened to Letting Go of Good, the book chat series, you want to go back and listen to it, because there's so much goody good stuff that I said on that podcast. It's about an hour or more. And this is going to be something that I'm re-emphasizing even now that I've seen it so two different authors writing about this from two different perspectives. So if you didn't catch it then, and I'm saying it again now, you need it because it came up again. And I was like, I want to talk about this. So here we go. Here we are. People can't solve your problems. Mark Manson says this is not me. People can't solve your problems for you, and they shouldn't try because they won't make you happy. This is Mark Manson. I'm going to say this again. People can't solve your problems for you, and they shouldn't try because they won't make you happy. You can't solve other people's problem for them either, because that likewise won't make them happy. The mark of an unhealthy relationship is two people who try to solve each other's problems in order to feel good about themselves. Rather than a healthy relationship is when two people solve their own problems in order to feel good about each other. The setting of proper boundaries doesn't mean you can't help or support your partner, or be helped and supported yourself. You both should support each other, but only because you choose to support and be supported, not because you feel obligated or entitled. Entitled people who blame others for their own emotions and actions do so because they believe that if they constantly paint themselves as victims, eventually someone will come along and save them, and they will receive the love they always wanted. Entitled people who take the blame for other people's emotions and actions do so because they believe that if they fix, that's in quotation marks, their partner and save him or her, they will receive the love and appreciation they always wanted. You got to get the book to get the rest of this, okay? I wrote in on the side, help one another because it is a desire, not an obligation. And then I put OMG exclamation point. I've healed some areas. So listen, I don't have anything else to add to that. You want to read the rest of the chapter, you want to read more into it, because this is a chapter that I labeled like victim mindset. Myself, that's not the title of the chapter, but I put that on there myself. Yeah. And then I also wrote, I read y'all another one of my notes that I wrote. Unhealthy equals two people trying to solve each other's problems. I'm gonna close this book, y'all, and I'm done. I'm done because this is the size of the book. So it's not, like I said, it's like 200 and something pages. And so it's something it can be in 206 pages to be exact. It's something that can be easily read and digested as quick as one day. But I will say that some of the stuff that he's saying is going to rub up against belief systems that you had or the BS that you have in your mind. And it also can be one of those things to where you realize like, man, like I don't agree with this, and you may not agree with it when you first hear it. And I'll be honest, some of the stuff I could, like, if I put the book down probably the first 2 days that I was reading it, because he was just saying he was dropping the F-bomb so many times. And then I had to sit with it and I asked myself, like, why does that bother you, Sierra? And like I said at the top of this, I recommend this book for people who are religious, because that's where I was when I was first reading this. I was very religious, and I just was like, man, like I just was like, man, like who would write a book that's the title of the book? But someone else that I came across was reading it and she shared it. And when she said, like, if the F word bothers you, you should read it. And I was like, why did she say that? But I'll read y'all the first page and I am completely done. I'll read you the first page of the book because that's something that I have been doing like reading the first page of the book, and I feel like it tells you a lot about what you're getting yourself into. Um, yeah, it gives you a lot. Um, so here we are. Let's see. Charles Bukowski, I think that's how you pronounce it, was an alcoholic, a womanizer. And the title of the chapter, I'm sorry, chapter one says, Don't Try. Charles Bukowski was an alcoholic, a womanizer, a chronic gambler, a loot, a cheapskate, a deadbeat, and on his worst days, a poet. He he's probably the last person on earth you would ever look to for life advice or expect to see in any sort of self-help book, which is why he's the perfect place to start. Bukowski wanted to be a writer, but for decades, his work was rejected by almost every magazine, newspaper, journal, agent, and publisher he submitted to. His work was horrible, they said, crude, disgusting, deprived. And as the stacks of rejection slips piled up, the weight of his failures pushed him deep into an alcohol-fueled depression that would follow him for most of his life. Bukowski had a day job as a letter filer at a post office. He got paid here we go. He got paid shit money and spent most of it on booze. So that's the title of the page. I probably did this backwards, but I can do this how I want to do it because, like Tabitha Brown says, it's my business. But that's the first page of the book. And if you're like, what? You telling you like because that made me want to read more because I'm like, what is this book actually gonna talk about? Like, you're telling me that this, like, I read the synopsis on the inside flap and the back of the flap. So I had a idea where what the book was about, but then I still was kind of like, man, why are we talking about this alcoholic, womanizer, chronic gambler, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what is this? But it pulled me in and I was just like, okay, let me see what this is about. Let's see where this is going. So I kind of just was interested in what he was writing about on the first page. And to be quite honest, I was like, I got to see where this is going because people don't usually write books about these types of people unless they're writing like a documentary or they're writing like a biography about themselves and stuff like that. So I was like, let's see what this is. So that's what got me in there. And also seeing another woman talk about this book before. And she was like, if the F-bomb bothers you, then you should probably read this book. And I was like, wow. And I was like, and like I said, it did bother me a couple of times as I was beginning to read it. In those first 2 days, I was like, I am not gonna make it through this. And I think I like blotted out the word at first because I was like, I want to see what this is. This is really good. And then I got to the place where I was like, it is what it is. I get it. And I would just say care in the place of the F bomb. So there was that. So that is all I have. I have two things I would love. Thank you for listening to the book chat episode number 2, where we were going through the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And I shared 4 things with you. I said 4 reasons that you should read this book is because he shares how pain is a catalyst for change. He talked about how, changing your values can be uncomfortable. The third reason you should read this book, I said, was because if you have a bad relationship with conflict or you just not sure how you think of conflict. And the fourth reason I said you should read this book is if you are looking to have healthier relationships. So that is that. And you have to go back and listen, but I added a fifth one in there just because it was coming top of mind as I was kind of going through the pages again. So that is it. I had to ask that you share this video or this audio with someone that you think that would be interested in reading this book. And then I also would ask that you would leave me a review on the podcast on Apple Podcasts or leave me some comments in the comment section like, hey girl, I like this book. I think I'm going to be interested in reading it. I'm going to leave the link to the book, Amazon link that you can like go and grab the book yourself, just so that you can see what it looks like in all of the sorts. And then I'll leave my podcast link as well. So I'll put that back on. I'll put the podcast link on here on Saturday morning. So if you like, I can't sit and watch this, but I want to listen to you, I'll put that link and you can be able to get to my podcast. So I'll just put my podcast link so that you can go to my podcast. So thank y'all so much for watching and thank you so much for listening. And this is until next month, y'all. So those are your 2 books for the month of April. Next month, I have a special guest and I cannot wait. She is a friend and she is a author. And so I cannot wait to have her on the podcast, and you get to see her beautiful face, and you also get to hear about her book. So you want to tune in for that first Friday or Saturday of May. Until next time, guys. Bye.